We need the jig. We have the boring bar. We have a false cam, I'll explain a little bit later. A dial indicator. We have some tools to measure. This will be used to put the false cam in and to put in a new bushing in the back of the block. Block has been rebabbited and the caps have been put on and torqued, and we put the shims in. So that was part of the last video, and now we're going to actually line bore the block. To insert this spacer, which will help center our false cam. This piece comes with the line boring kit. Of course, this will be removed later. Now we take our false camshaft and we work it in here. It should go all the way through the back bushing. Alright, now we have the false cam in there. So this goes on the front and on the space in the back. The second one will fit on that side. The jig has a marking to go to the front. So this part goes to the front, this end. And we'll just set that on there now. We just set it loosely on there. There's some bolt holes, so we want to try to get them lined up. And then we'll take our boring bar and we'll set that through here. I'll turn this around here in a minute. And then we take our bracket here and line up, get it over our boring bar. Like that. Do the same thing on the back end here. So now this is what's going to determine where the boring jig actually aligns through where the crankshaft will go. This is a critical distance, because the small timing gear and the large timing gear need to mesh within specs. And based on how the Model T engine was constructed, that is not a guaranteed place. In other words, we might be a little on either side a little bit, but so we're not going to try to center this bar with our caps and our block. We're going to place it where it's exactly this distance from the camshaft. So now you can see our two brackets are set there. Our jig is lined up where the holes that we're going to use on the block. We use these bolts. They're smaller than the holes in the block, which will give us a little bit of movement that's going to be required to get the jig lined up properly. So I'm going to just kind of loosely put in the 4 screws here. Again, the issue here is that the jig has to be aligned properly so that the crankshaft and the camshaft are aligned properly. On a Model T engine, that can vary from engine to engine, from block to block. Okay, now we remove the false cam. We don't need it anymore because our jig is properly attached to the block. Then we'll kind of talk about the math as to how much we're going to bore out. This particular crankshaft, after it was reground, 20 thousandths was taken off the mains. So the standard is 1.250 inches. Our particular crankshaft that's going to go in here is 1.230, or 20 thousandths under that. So that's what we're going to cut our mains to. Now at this point, I've installed a little cutting tool like this into the bar, and I've tightened it down with a couple of little Allen screws. So our boring bar is 7/8 of an inch, which is 0.875. Since we have to get to 1.230 thousandths, we subtract the 0.875 from the 1.230, and what we basically have to cut out with this tool is 0.355 thousandths, or 355 thousandths. Now, since it cuts all the way around, we have to double the amount that we measure off of here. So basically, if we divide 355 by 2, it equals 0.177. So we're going to measure this right now, and we can see that our cutting bar is at 120 roughly. So our first cut is going to be 57,000 short. With this system, we have to do each bearing by itself. We can't just push the bar through. We're going to do the front, then we'll do the center, and then we'll do the rear. We don't want to underdo it, and obviously we don't want to overdo it. But the closer we get, the easier it is going to be to fit the crank when we do that part of it. So right now we're going to start out at 120. Or 128. So I've raised it up about 7 or 8,000, and we will cut it. Alright, so this will be the third cut. We're up to about 133, 34, cutting another 6 or 7 thousandths. Need to tighten the bit. Now I've readjusted the bit again. We'll just measure it here. We're getting about 140 on the dial indicator. Okay, I've raised it again. Measure it now. We're at 175, and that's within 2.5 thousandths of what we want. So once we get through here, we're getting very close. All right, now I took a little extra time and made sure I got it close, and right there we're at 177. And that's what we're looking for. So this will be the final cut. And of course we'll run it through quite a bit longer than the other cuts, just because we want to make sure we get a good clean cut. Alright, that's pretty much it. At this point I'm going to take the bar out, clean it up, take our bit off, and get prepared to do the center. I don't know how well you can see it actually on the camera, but this side is a little thinner than this side over here. Again, if we would have just bored it based off the center to make it concentric inside here, actually then our crankshaft would be a little bit in this direction here, and it would be pushing too tightly on the camshaft gear, and the small timing gear would be pushed together. Again, since we set the jig based on the camshaft, this should allow that to be the correct distance so the two gears will line up. So the next step I have here is to do the center main. Put a little oil on the just putting a little oil on the shaft of the bar. Our next step is to measure the distance between our newly ground thrust surfaces on the crankshaft. They also resurface the thrust areas, which makes them larger than standard. This distance is now larger than the standard crankshaft, so we need to measure that distance. And we use the measuring tool and find out that this is 3 inches 132 thousandths. So on our third main thrust surface, that's what we need to come down to. So now we need to measure what the rebabbited third cap measures out to. And basically, it's 3 inches 262 to 3 thousandths thick. With the blade I have in here, which basically looks like this. In addition to adding the new cutting bit, we have to add this little device onto the boring bar, and when we tighten that down, this is going to limit how far forward our blade can go as we cut. But on the front portion of it, we set it up here, and as we cut, and the farther we need to go, we can move this out, like let's say 10 thousandths at a time, and cut that surface perpendicular to the crankshaft. Alright, now our blade is starting to cut the thrust surface on here, and I've just moved our stop back 10 thousandths. Right now I moved the bar out of the way so I can trim off the edges here. Our blade doesn't quite get all the way out, so there's a fine little edge there that I need to cut off, otherwise my measurement here, it wouldn't be accurate. So 3.247. So that means we've taken off about 15 thousandths off this surface here. Alright, I've reset the stop, and we're going to take another 8 to 10 thousandths off here. So now I'm measuring the distance here, and we've reduced it from 3.262 down to 3.232, or 30 thousandths. Now, our thrust surface on our crank that we have to fit it to is 3.132, or 130 thousandths will have to be taken off from a combination of this side and this side. So far we've moved in 30 thousandths. So we have 100 thousandths to be removed off both sides. I'm going to take another 10 to 20 thousandths off here, and then I'm going to switch around and start to remove it off the rear. We took about 9 thousandths off, so we are now 91 thousandths away. At this point, we're going to stop on this side, and we're going to rearrange our bit and start taking off from this side, the back side. Right now we're going to put our stop on the end here so that we don't cut too far. And we'll give it a little room here at first to the other part we have to do is put our drill in reverse, because in order to cut we have to do it in the other direction. There, we hit the limit of our stop, and we'll put our gauge on there. We're at 3.214. 3.214. So this is we've made the final cut on the back side, and you can see the Babbitt on the back of the cap. So we still have 35 thousandths to cut off before the crank will fit in here. So we need to take it off the inside thrust surface, and that will end up being as thin as this as well. So basically we're setting the crank as far as forward or backwards on the fact that we can't take any more off of here. We have to get the rest off the other side. All right, we have 35 thousandths to take off, and we're going to need to take it off this surface. I've just set the stop back 8 thousandths, and we'll take that off and we'll take another measurement. Now if you can see that, we're at 3.161. We want to get to 3.132. So we're 29 thousandths away. All right, I've reset the stop, and we're going to take another 8 to 10 thousandths off here. All right. I don't know if you can see that, 3.151. So now we're within 19 thousandths. All right, we'll clean up our edge and we'll take a measurement. Remember, this is like the Price is Right. We want to be close but not over our number, or we lose. So there we're at 3.139. We're within 6 thousandths of what or 7 thousandths of what we want. So we're just going to make one small, maybe 5 or less thousandths for the last one. So I'm going to use these brass feeler gauge to set it. This is 6 thousandths right here. You can see it's not a whole lot. And normally this is about what we need to take off yet right here. Well, we're getting 3.134, and that's close enough for me. One thing we do before we take the jig off is, and we do this by hand, to put the blade back in, and we're going to cut a curved surface on the end of this main. And I'll do it to the front side. Okay, we finished everything we were going to do with the boring jig, and we're going to remove it. Again, at this point, you want to remove it after you've done everything, because it's very difficult, from what I've read, to ever get it back to where you had it prior, although I've never tried. So I remove the screws. Except for this one, and we'll take it off. Next, I'm going to take off the third main, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so now we're going to remove the third main cap just to see what it looks like. It's pretty nice. But I'm going to see if I can get a close-up of this. Again, we mark the cap with a line so we know this side goes towards the camshaft, so that we always get it back the way we bored it. So that's basically what we do to bore the block, and from here we'll go to step 2, or part 2, where we fit the crankshaft.